Check out this building. Just 1 year ago, a building like this housed thousands of Chinese factory workers. But there's been no activity for months. No one has come or gone. The building is empty, the machines silent. And the latest intelligence out of China shows the same thing happening in megacities up and down the giant country. Factories have gone dark. Workers have disappeared. What exactly is happening? Of course, the Chinese government hasn't commented on the shuttered factories. They want everyone to think it's business as usual. Their power rests on the idea that China is an economic superpower, capable of dominating the rest of the world. But the real story on the ground tells a far different tale. China is in deep trouble. Its whole empire was built on being the world's factory floor. If the factories are closing, then something has gone very wrong. And when I dug deeper, I found out that's exactly what's happening. Over $100 billion in business investment money has fled China in the last year alone, and billions more are to come. Not just that, but this money is mostly flowing to one surprising place, a place I think could house some of the best investments of the next decade. And if you hop onto this big trend now, you could ride this surge of money rushing out of China. My name is Sean Brodrick. I've been featured on networks as different as CNBC and Fox News because of my long track record for predicting global events and showing investors the best way to take advantage of them. My team and I called the 2008 financial crisis ahead of time. We called the start of the roaring bull market that followed as well. We predicted the election of Donald Trump a year ahead of time, while most experts were still poo-pooing his chances. And I predicted the recent Russian invasion of Ukraine and its effect on the stock market. Now, I believe we're going to see a mass exodus of foreign businesses from China. In fact, 90% of global corporate executives say they are in the process of moving production out of China or have plans to do so. Apple, Amazon, Volvo, Samsung, Google, Microsoft. These are just a few of the big names who are disappearing from China. And now Wall Street, which was China's biggest cheerleader in the West for years, is souring on the country. JP Morgan and Chase even called Chinese stocks uninvestable before they backpedaled and labeled them merely unattractive. So where are all of these jobs and money going? Well, you might have heard some talk about India or Vietnam or Malaysia. And yes, a fraction of these jobs have found their way to cheaper third world countries. But when I really dug in and chased the money, I found that most of it was going to a surprising place. It's not a third world country, and it's not in Southeast Asia. It has a stable government and a huge supply of skilled workers. And in the last 12 months, over $200 billion of manufacturing investment has flooded into this country. Soon, it will grow by 10 times to over $2 trillion. Obviously, this type of monetary shift can change the fortune of whole countries, let alone individual investors savvy enough to spot this massive shift ahead of time. So, what country is it? I'm not talking about anywhere in Europe, and it's not Canada or Australia or anywhere like that. Give up? Believe it or not, I'm talking about right here in the US of A. That's right. Trillions of dollars, hundreds of factories, and thousands of jobs are coming back to America. A new industrial boom is beginning in America, and at China's expense, no less. Not only that, this manufacturing return to America, what some are calling reshoring, could enrich a few companies, as I'll explain in a moment. Free trade only works when everyone plays by the same rules. China was breaking those rules for years, and, to be very blunt, greedy, short-sighted people in America allowed them to get away with it. We saw in 2020 added even more incentive to bring manufacturing back to the States. And what began as a slow trickle of reinvestment in America has grown into a raging current, especially in the past 12 months. Manufacturing construction in America reached $108 billion last year, the highest annual amount on record. And U.S. manufacturing orders from China were nearly cut in half last year, a drastic 12 months change. It's why the Wall Street Journal announced that America is back in the factory business. There are new advanced battery factories in places like Lansing, Michigan, built by General Motors and LG. Huge semiconductor and solar panel plants are sprouting up in Arizona, Ohio, and New York State. And Apple just signed a multi-billion-dollar deal with chipmaker Broadcom to begin making 5G equipment right here in America. This tidal wave of investment is why Volkswagen CEO Scott Keogh recently told Bloomberg there's never been a better time to build a factory in America. He went even further, saying it's a little bit like the gold rush, and it's not all just expensive high-tech goods. Danish toy giant Lego broke ground on a new plant near Richmond, Virginia. Eyeglass companies like Zenni now make their glasses in Ohio after making everything in China for years. Their new factory produces thousands of glasses for only $3 more per pair than it would cost them in China. And with a shorter supply chain, they can deliver to customers faster than ever. Bicycle maker Kent International made all their bikes in China for decades, but after their biggest customer, a little store called Walmart, told them they wanted US-made bikes, they opened a new factory in South Carolina. Supplement company Viero Systems sourced everything from China for years. After being hit by supply chain problems during the pandemic, they built their first plant in Nebraska. And this is just scratching the surface. But at this point, you may be wondering, why is all this happening now? Why, after decades of outsourcing, is capital flying out of China and back to the U.S.? For a couple of big reasons, actually. Security is one of them. A lot of companies just don't want to deal with the hassle of doing business in China anymore. As tensions with the U.S. increase, the paranoid Communist Party passed a national security law that is so hostile to foreign companies that it's scaring a lot of them away. They've used this law to threaten and intimidate foreign companies, and American ones in particular. The Shanghai office of Bain, a major U.S. consulting firm, was raided by government thugs. The same thing happened to American due diligence firm Mintz Group. Police shut down their office in Beijing and even detained 5 of their employees. These are not isolated incidents. America and global companies are subject to constant harassment over there. It's gotten so bad that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce issued a warning about the risks of doing business in China. But an even bigger reason is cost. You see, China became the world's factory floor back when it was still a developing, borderline third world country. People who had nothing were more than happy to work long hours in factories for low pay. But China has evolved over the last couple of decades. It's a middle-class country now. Far fewer people are signing up to work 14 hours a day for $2 an hour. The same thing happened in the British and American industrial revolutions. Eventually, as workers accumulate more money, they rebel, and wages rise, productivity declines, and business are forced to adapt. In the case of China, for American companies, it's a simple question. Why would I move my whole business across the world to a hostile country like China if it doesn't actually save me money? It's both cost and security that are accelerating this Chinese capital exodus and boosting the return of industry to America. And I have good reason to believe this will really kick into high gear in the next 18 months. Why? It's because of this island right here. This is Taiwan. It's a democratic, self-governing island that China claims as its own. But Taiwan also has a promise from the United States of protection from China. Over the years, China has increased threats to invade the island and take it by force. Look, I know geopolitics doesn't interest everybody. It's not my favorite subject either. But every single person out there who has a 401k, an IRA, or a pension needs to pay attention to this because it will affect you. If China invades, and all signs indicate that's exactly what they're planning, I'll get to that in a moment. If they invade, Trans-Pacific trade will shut down. Period. No shipments of countless brands of t-shirts, toys, laptops, smartphones, or tablets. No shipment of all the other things that were outsourced. Nothing. It all grinds to a halt. This will be catastrophically disruptive to companies that are still sourcing everything from China, or even from other countries in Asia. Their items will quickly run out on American shelves and will not be refilled. A scary picture, for sure. But there's reason for hope. The companies that survive that crisis and dominate the competition are the ones that have the presence here in the U.S. They'll be isolated from the breakdown in supply chains because they have factories here. Simply put, the shorter your supply chain is, the stronger and safer it will be. And there's nowhere in the world better to build a strong, secure supply chain than right here in the U.S.